Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my June reading wrap-up. Let's get into the books. In June I read 5 books and DNF'd 2 books. The first book that I finished was The Girl in the Tower by Katherine Arden. This is the second book in the Winter Night trilogy, I believe. It is Russian folklore inspired. It is about a young woman at this point named Vasilisa who has been banished from her childhood home because she is practicing the old pagan ways, and her little community has become very Orthodox Christian. And so now she is a young woman in medieval Russia all by herself, and so she must masquerade as a boy for her own protection and her freedom. Hijinks ensue for her family, who are connected to the Prince of Russia, when the prince acknowledges and praises the boy that he thinks Vasilisa is during this hunt. I forgot how fun these were, how, like, I can see Tamora Pierce vibes. I can see maybe that's why I really enjoyed them the first time, is Vasilisa's spirit, shall we say, and her refusal to perform the stereotypical role of medieval woman. I just think they're a lot of fun, and I am so excited to see where this concludes. Overall, I'm glad that this book lived up to the hype. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. If you like fairy tale inspired stories, if you like fantasy with subversive female characters, I think you will get a kick out of this book. It's maybe not seasonally appropriate to read right now in like the peak of summer when many of us are like living through heat waves. Put a pin in it, get it on your library holds list for this fall or winter. I think it is definitely worth the read. Now that I'm rereading it, I've touched it twice. It's not just my initial hype. I do think that these are really fun stories. So I would highly recommend the Winter Night trilogy. So good. At least the first 2 books. I can't speak to the third. Maybe she ruins it. I doubt it. So the second book I read in June is If at Birth You Don't Succeed by Zach Anner. Zach Anner is a comedian. He has cerebral palsy and he has this online presence, YouTube presence. He won an O Network show, so he had a traditional media presence as well. And so this is his biography of finding fame, finding himself, finding love, pushing back at the media space. He pitched this traveling while disabled show with the O Network, and it ended up a lot more sanitized. So then finally, like, doing his own thing in the YouTube space, in the online digital creation space, he actually creates his vision. I was first introduced to Anner via some of the Funhouse Rooster Teeth videos. He is very funny, and if you have encountered him in that space, I think you will find his memoir very funny. I found myself laughing out loud. There's a particular moment where the shitting of pants involves putting the soiled underpants into a bag of lovingly prepared cut fruit, and hiding the shame, and it's just, there are so many little moments, and he's so honest and so funny. If you're already familiar with him, I would recommend it. So I gave this 4 out of 5 stars, and I borrowed this from my partner. So the next book that I attempted to read and actually DNF'd was Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. So this is on my 21 to read in 2021 list. My mom loves Fredrik Backman. She loves A Man Called Ov, and she just says they're funny. This is about a man who just wants to be a good human. So his wife cheated on him and she took everything in the divorce, and he never fought, he never pushed back about what he was getting, the short end of the stick, because he wanted to have a nice relationship with his ex-wife for their children. And in doing so, he ends up homeless because he loses so much money in the divorce, and he can't afford an apartment, which means that he's going to lose custody of his kids if he can't provide a place for them to come visit him, and that's really all he wants, is to maintain a good relationship with his spouse so that he can maintain a relationship with his children. In a last-ditch attempt to get the money together to show that he can have a safe space for his kids, he decides to rob a bank with what he believes is a toy gun, and he, in like a comedy of errors, robs a cashless bank, and then while attempting to escape, opens up an apartment that happens to have a bunch of people in it, and then it becomes a hostage situation. This is not spoilers. It's like all in the first like 40 pages or so. I gave this a decent chance to get into it, and it's just too depressing. I think we're supposed to be laughing at this comedy of errors. Like, what else could go wrong, right? Like, literally everything in this man's life is falling apart, and the systems are not in place to support him. He's like literally trying his best. The systems are not in place to support him. And it was just too much. It was too much bad stuff, and it wasn't funny. And then of course we're flipping to different perspectives, because it's anxious people, other people. We're flipping to different perspectives as they're piecing together this police case, and everybody has something going on in their lives that is bad, and we're learning about all of these bad things, and maybe it picks up past like the 40% mark. Maybe there's some sort of happy ending, but the piling on of negativity I just wasn't in a good headspace for, and that is totally on me. It's nothing against the book. Like, clearly it was well written, because I was feeling for these characters so strongly that it deeply upset me. I have decided to DNF this. I'm not sure if I am going to just give this back to my mom and take it off my TBR list entirely, or if I'm going to wait and try again, but for now I did attempt to read this and DNF it this month. The next book that I read was for the Patron book club, and that is Song of Susannah by Stephen King. This is the 6th book in the Dark Tower series. This is entirely focused on Susannah Dean, who is a badass, and I didn't fully realize this at the time, like the first time I read this, but Susannah is a member of the Black Power movement. She is a badass character before she even becomes a gunslinger. She is fighting for justice and change in like the primary world. And then she gets pulled into the secondary world of the fantasy space, Roland's world, as a Black female disabled gunslinger. I knew she was a badass character, but also that she has this activist past. Didn't fully appreciate it. This definitely cements this as my favorite book in the series. To have more nuance and complexity added to this character in this world, on this journey. I have been enjoying this reread project so much. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I kept that rating, which is always good on the reread when your star ratings don't fall. Like if you have this really hyped up book that you think you love and then you reread it and you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? That did not happen here, so grateful for that. Before we move on to the next book, if you like what you see here today, consider giving this video a thumbs up and consider subscribing. 67% of viewers of this channel regularly view and are not subscribed according to the YouTube analytics. Please consider subscribing, it really helps the channel out. And now for the next book. The next book was the Patron drop-in book club for June, and that is Bailey's Cafe by Gloria Naylor. This book, oh, chef's kiss. This, in every way, is a beautifully crafted book. We have this poem at the front. Hush now, can you hear it? Can't be far away. Needing the blues to get there. Look and you can hear it. Look and you can hear the blues. Open a place, never closing, Bailey's Cafe. So we have this invocation that the blues open this world into this way station of Bailey's Cafe. It's between life and death. The book is constructed like some sort of performance piece we're about to watch. We have Maestro, If You Please, and then our narrator begins this composition. He begins to play, he begins to tell us the story of the women who come through the doors, who come into this pocket dimension, who have experienced trauma in their lives as Black women in the 1940s. We're looking at a post-World War II world. We're looking at the height of the civil rights movement. We're seeing the sparks ignite for the civil rights movement. Heavy content warnings for child abuse, sexual abuse, female genital mutilation, suicidal ideation, addiction, And alcoholism, like there are so many content warnings for this book because of the traumas that these women are dealing with, but each piece is beautifully crafted. You get a snapshot of a woman's life as she ends up in this place between life and death in this supernatural cafe. The cafe creates this space to grieve and to deal with trauma for women from various wheres and whens. From start to finish, every aspect of this book is gorgeous, and I'm still thinking about it. If you have not read it, put some Gloria Naylor on your TBR, on your library holds list. I am personally looking at the rest of her bibliography. I want to see more of what this amazingly, incredibly talented writer has crafted. A new fave, a new author to explore. Check out Gloria Naylor, check out Bailey's Cafe if you're okay to deal with this sort of heavy content. I cannot recommend it enough. 5 out of 5 stars. This was a new buy. The next book that I attempted to read and DNF'd was Wilder Girls by Rory Powers. So this is a young adult dystopian novel. I think it's supposed to be, and it has been pitched sort of as horror, but very much reads as dystopian, somewhat in the vein of The Fireman by Joe Hill. So there is some sort of mysterious pox that results in girls dealing with different sorts of bodily ailments and disfigurements. There's probably some sort of disability studies reading possible for this book. I'm not sure if it would come out pro or con. I think I got about 40 to 50% into the book when I decided to DNF it. It sounded like a really cool idea. This girls' boarding school affected by the pox, isolated from the rest of the world, no seemingly like larger authorities, very much being kept as this pocket. Honestly, the characters weren't very interesting or compelling. Again, I mentioned The Fireman by Joe Hill. I think it's a similar idea, but Joe Hill does a better job executing a bodily, how do I even want to describe it? Like some sort of pox that affects the body but doesn't kill. Like folks are living with a new body. I think Joe Hill does it better in The Fireman. I was very much reminded of that. If you're looking for that dystopian horror aspect, there are other things that I would recommend over this book. It just wasn't working for me. And I do think that like 40 to 50% is a good shot. Like if you get to halfway and you're like, yeah, I don't really care how this ends, something has gone wrong. Oh no, I have in my notes that I had 60%. So I gave it a really good shot. I don't want to yuck anyone's yum, but I think I've read better in that sort of trope of dystopian fiction. The last book that I read this month was Camp by Lev Rosen. So this is about a queer, sex-positive camp for children. It is the story of Del, who has reinvented himself. He is a very like femme, fabulous, almost stereotypical theater queer kid who really loves, has the biggest crush on this mask for mask guy at camp. Between summers, Del spends the year getting into sports, cuts his hair, doesn't do his makeup or nail polish, like very much butches himself up so that when he gets to camp, he's so radically transformed that his crush doesn't even recognize him as somebody he's been going to camp with for years. The boy that he has a crush on, whose name I'm blanking on right now, is a bit of a playboy, spends his summer courting and fucking boys for like 2 weeks at a time and then like discarding them. And so they begin this false relationship. Del is very much not being his full self. It's not that he doesn't like being physically active and moving his body, but he misses truly expressing his queer self in all of the beautiful, wonderful ways that he can at camp with makeup and nail polish and more femme dress, because this camp is the space to be as queer and as different and as you want. And he really squashes himself to fit this mask for mask narrative that his crush likes. And of course, because he's not being himself, things go wrong in this romantic comedy. It was beautifully done, beautifully written, gave me strong nostalgic feels for summer camp. I have some fond camp memories. When you pull out the religious portion of the camp that I went to, it was a totally unique experience. Like, and I have no issues with this, but I'm surprised that this sex in this book is so graphic. It made me feel uncomfortable because I'm an adult reading about 16-year-olds, and I know that this is for children. So children reading about really graphic gay sex in a sexy but also like instructional manner, excellent. Great. It's great that we've got that in YA, that we have mention of safe sex, of consensual sex, and also like instructional sex. It's not that like fade to black that a lot of YA texts do, and I think because queer sex education is lacking in a lot of places, it's fantastic that Rosen has done this in this text. But as an adult reading it, it very much felt like I shouldn't be here. I've never had that happen with YA before, and I don't know if it's because I'm finally feeling like an adult. I very much feel like an adult in a way that I haven't felt like an adult in the past, living at home, still in school, for example. Like, I feel like a real adult, and for some reason there's this click where it felt voyeuristic for me to witness this. I could pull back as like an academic, as somebody with scholarly ambitions who would love to study young adult literature. That is my area of interest. My research area is children's lit and gender studies. So like, from the academic perspective, I am delighted to analyze that scene, but from the like joyful, blissful, escapist reader perspective, the graphicness of the sex felt deeply uncomfortable, which is why I didn't give this a 5 out of 5 stars. Many parts of this book were pure joy and pure bliss. There's this like, ooh, this isn't for me anymore. And it's not that it's gay, it's that it's children having sex. That's why I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. That like uncomfortable feeling that I got as an adult bearing witness to this, because I wasn't reading it to analyze it. I was reading it for like a fun, campy, queer book for Pride Month. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I borrowed this from the library. I cannot recommend it enough. If you have queer young people in your life, specifically I think gay young people in your life, gift them this if they haven't already read it, because it's just delightful. It is delightful to see queer people in a queer camp. I've said this before about young adult literature, how young adult literature, like queer young adult literature, is often about coming out. And not that there isn't value in coming out, but I think there's also value in queer joy and queer lived experience, like the experience of being out and queer has value, and I feel like we don't see it enough. I really loved this. I really appreciate how Rosen writes for young people. That brings me to the end of my June wrap-up. Let me know your thoughts on these books in the comments down below. Have you read any of these? Are you interested in any of these? I would love to hear your thoughts. Also, if you have had the experience of being an adult, reading young adult literature, and finding discomfort in bearing witness to young adult expressions of sexual desire, let me know if there's like a click moment for you. On the screen right here, you will see the Patron drop-in book club book for July. It is a short dystopian novella that sounds fascinating. It's like 150 pages. I am so excited to get to this because it sounds very good. I'm excited for the live stream. The link to the Patreon page is in the description box down below. Have a peruse, consider joining us. Before we go, we have to thank my patrons who make videos like this possible. I really appreciate the work that they enable me to do. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you are all staying safe, that you are doing well. I will see you soon. Bye.